Welcome back. Newly released numbers from Stats Canada point to a decline in the number of youth before the courts in 2014-2015. The 33,000 cases completed last year represented a 19% drop from the year previous and marked the lowest caseload in the 2 decades data has been collected. The most common offenses include theft, common assault, and break-and-enters. New Brunswick is home to the highest number of guilty youth verdicts. Alberta aligned with the Canadian average, with 57% of cases resulting in a guilty verdict. What do you see reflected in these stats, Mark? Well, what do they tell you?
It's pretty dramatic, and I think that it's been an ongoing decline in youth crime and the criminalization of youth behavior since the Youth Criminal Justice Act came in effect in 2003. Before that, we had the Young Offenders Act. But I think it's reflective of more of an inclusive education system, a more intrusive child welfare system, and a more robust and outreaching healthcare system. And those are all really protective factors in young people's lives. And the other thing is that we're also really starting to work on child poverty. So we're trying to look at some of the systemic issues that get young people out of crime or preventing them from
keeping them from even getting introduced into the system.
And I think that this is an indicator because, like I said, this is very dramatic, and I think it gives us a lot of people within the system a lot of hope.
Greg, how significant are these numbers to you?
Well, I mean, these numbers, although they're the lowest in 2 decades, the comparison was only over a 1-year period. And even though it was nationwide, I think the sampling pool is relatively small. So, some years crime goes up and some years crime goes down. I think the big picture is that crime has been going down consistently for youth, for adults, for violent crime in general since the mid-70s. And I think these statistics are reflective of that overall trend in society.
Erin, why should imprisonment of youth be the punishment of last resort?
I think it makes a lot more sense to try and keep youth in the community as much as possible. We do want to be supporting them in any way that we possibly can, and by sending them off and stigmatizing them through incarceration, I think we're doing them a disservice and ourselves ultimately a disservice by not making ways or making room for them to participate and be more active participants in their own lives.
Now, roughly 15% of guilty verdicts involving youth resulted in time behind bars, and the median length of a jail term was approximately 40 days, marking a decline from previous years. Okay, Mark, if they're not serving time behind bars, what's transpiring?
Well, I think there's a big focus on not only diverting young people away from the criminal justice system, the court processes when possible. I think there's also a heavy focus on community corrections, probation, community service hours, things called non-residential orders, where they're really entwining young people that are at risk or in conflict with the law with a lot of community supports, a lot of community agencies with a focus on rehabilitation, but counseling, issues of trauma, issues of advocacy, trying to get child welfare and the education system to fill in those voids and provide, again, those protective factors that will, actually reduce criminal behavior with young people. And I think that it's starting to pay off. I mean, when you look at the Edmonton Young Offender Center, it used to hold 270, 280 kids. Now the count's 60, 70. In Calgary, I think there's about 45 people, 40, 50 kids at the Calgary Young Offender Center. So there have been dramatic reductions in young people incarcerated in Alberta.
All right, time for one more topic tonight. Albertans mourned the death of 23-year-old Mylan Hicks last week. The Calgary Stampeder shot at a Calgary nightclub. 19-year-old Nelson Ludgella has been charged with second-degree murder, appeared in court via CCTV last Friday, and his sister claims he is innocent and that he didn't even witness the altercation that later led to the shooting.
I don't believe that he did it at all. I believe there's someone there out there, he's the one did it, but they don't telling the truth.
I dislike the hurt that he caused our family. He's still somebody's son too. So I got to find a way. Jesus, I got to find a way to forgive him.
The owners of the Marquee, the club where the shooting took place, reported to be reviewing the security systems in order to improve the safety of patrons. Mark, the shooting is said to have happened just outside of the club. So should we be looking at more stringent safety measures in Alberta?
You know, I think we have pretty strong safeguards. We have a lot of focus on community safety. I really don't know what more we can do. We have a strong police presence within our communities. We have nightclubs and bars are actively participating in community initiatives where they're looking at ID and they're screening potential persons that are coming into the bars and nightclubs. So I really don't know what more we could do to prevent these sort of one-offs, and I'm not sort of minimizing what had happened and the tragedy behind it, but really from a systemic issue, I just don't see what we can do.
Greg, high-profile case, high-profile victim. Does this speak to a trend of violent crime in Calgary?
Yeah, again, you know, it's a pretty isolated incident with respect to making deductions from a single incident. I think I remember, you know, if you go back in Calgary's history, you go back 10 years ago, there was a spree of violent crime with respect to gang violence between the FOBs and the FKs. A lot of it was done at nightclubs and shootings and whatnot, and eventually, once that particular fracas and feud died out, then we had a lull. So again, I don't think there's any trends that you're going to be deducting from this particular isolated incident outside of a nightclub.
Well, and Erin, what stands out for you about this case? Because you know there are said to have been bystanders, and maybe even some of whom were recording that incident on their phones.
Yeah, actually, that is the part that stands out most for me is the bystander apathy, potentially in this case. Of course, I don't really know what was going on at that particular moment, but I did read a report suggesting that the police had come back to the scene and that there were people offering videos and pictures of what had transpired. So the question that I have is, what were these people doing, taking pictures of this? And again, it's not clear if they came upon the scene after or if this is happening during the event. But it does make me wonder what people are doing, taking pictures or filming video when they could be calling 911 to prevent something like this.
Well, certainly a case that is far from over. Folks, always appreciate your perspective. Thank you ever so kindly. Youth Justice Advocate Mark Cherrington. Erin Gibbs Van Brunschot is an Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Calgary, and defense lawyer Greg Dunn.